Wade Hollis rode over to the old Carrow place on a cold morning in October, fully expecting to find a city woman packing her bags. What Wade found instead was Josephine Carrow standing at the woodpile in a good wool coat that was plainly ruined already, looking at a heap of unsplit rounds like a problem she meant to solve. Wade Hollis was 37 years old. Wade ran cattle on the land next to the Carrow place, and Wade had promised the woman's late uncle, old Amos Carrow, that he would look in on the place if anything ever happened to him. Something had happened to Amos. Amos had died in the spring. And now Amos's niece had come all the way from Boston to run 400 acres of hard Wyoming grass, and Wade Hollis had come over to tell her, kindly, that she should go home. So Wade said it. Wade sat his horse and looked down at Josephine Carrow in her ruined city coat and said, "Miss Carrow, I'll be plain with you, because plain is a kindness out here. A ranch is no place for a city girl. This land has broken stronger folks than you, folks born to it. There's no shame in selling the place and going back east to your own kind of life. I'll give you a fair price for the land myself, and you can be home before the snow comes." Josephine Carrow looked up at Wade Hollis, and Josephine Carrow smiled. It was not an angry smile, and it was not a hurt smile. It was the small, patient smile of a person who has heard a thing many times and has stopped bothering to argue with it. Then Josephine Carrow bent down and picked up the axe that was leaning against the chopping block and set a round of pine wood up on end and swung. The axe came down clean and true and split the round in two halves that fell neat to either side. Josephine set up another round. She split that one too. She set up a third. Wade Hollis sat his horse and watched the city girl in the ruined coat split her third round of wood without so much as looking up at him again. And Wade did not know quite what to say. "My uncle Amos taught me to split wood when I was 9 years old," Josephine said, between swings, not unkindly. "He came out to visit us in Boston every few years, and he always said a person who could not warm her own house had no business being cold. I have been splitting my own wood for 20 years, Mr. Hollis. I did it in a Boston backyard, and I will do it here. The wood does not know what city I came from." And Josephine set up another round and split it. I want you to notice what happened in Wade Hollis right then, because it is the whole of this story in one small moment. Wade had arrived certain of a thing. He was certain that Josephine Carrow was soft, and that the land would break her, and that the kind thing was to send her home before it did. And in the space of 4 split rounds of pine, that certainty got its first crack. It would take a whole hard winter to break it all the way open. But it cracked, right there at the woodpile, and Wade Hollis rode home that morning turning it over, a little annoyed and a little impressed, which is a dangerous thing for a lonely man to feel at the same time. This is the story of a season on the Powder River, and of a man who told a woman she did not belong, and spent the months that followed being proved wrong about that, over and over, until being proved wrong stopped feeling like losing, and started feeling like the best thing that had ever happened to him. Remember the axe. Remember the woodpile, and the ruined coat, and the small, patient smile. We will come back to that woodpile before we are done. Let me tell you why Josephine Carrow left Boston for a hard patch of Wyoming, because it was not a whim, and it was not desperation, and understanding it matters. Josephine Carrow was 29. Josephine had grown up in a respectable Boston family that had, over the years, quietly run short of money and long on expectations. Josephine had been engaged once to a suitable young man, and the engagement had ended when the young man's family decided Josephine's family was no longer suitable enough. Josephine had watched herself become, in the eyes of everyone around her, a problem to be solved. An unmarried woman with no money and no prospects, taking up a room in a relative's house, a burden politely borne. Josephine had hated that more than she had ever hated anything. Not the poverty, the being born, the being a burden that people were too kind to name out loud. And then old Uncle Amos died, out in Wyoming, and left his ranch to Josephine, because Amos had always liked the girl who could split wood, and Amos had no children of his own. The Boston relatives assumed Josephine would sell the place sight unseen and use the money to become a slightly less burdensome burden. Instead, Josephine Carrow packed 2 trunks and bought a one-way ticket west because Josephine had decided that she would rather fail at something of her own than succeed at being tolerated in someone else's house. Remember that. Josephine did not come west to find a husband. Josephine came west to stop being a burden and to have, for the first time in her life, a thing that was hers. Uncle Amos had written to Josephine over the years, long letters about the ranch, about the stock and the seasons and the neighbors. Josephine had read every one, so Josephine did not arrive as ignorant as Wade Hollis assumed. Josephine knew the names of the creeks and the way the winter came. She knew the ranch was hard. She had chosen it anyway, with her eyes open, which is a different thing entirely from arriving soft and surprised. Now let me tell you about Wade Hollis, and why Wade was so certain the land would break a city woman, because his certainty was not cruelty. It was grief. Wade Hollis had been married once. Her name was Caroline. Caroline had come from a town back east, a real town, with paved streets and a piano in the parlor, and Wade had met her on a cattle-buying trip and courted her and brought her home to the Powder River as his bride. And Caroline had withered here. That is the only word Wade ever found for it. The isolation, the wind that never stopped, the winters that shut a person indoors for weeks, the sheer, hard, endless work of a ranch. Caroline had not been made for it, and the land had worn her down, month by month, until she was a thin, unhappy shadow of the bright girl Wade had married. Caroline died in the 4th winter, of a fever, but Wade always believed in his heart that the land had taken the fight out of her long before the fever finished the job. And Wade Hollis had carried, ever since, a deep and settled conviction that a woman raised soft in a town could not survive this country, and that a man who brought one here was doing her a slow cruelty, however much he loved her. Wade had loved Caroline. Watching the land wear her away had been the worst thing Wade ever lived through. So when Wade looked at Josephine Carrow in her ruined Boston coat, Wade did not see a woman to be scorned. Wade saw Caroline all over again, and Wade wanted, more than anything, to spare this new city woman the slow withering he had watched once already and could not bear to watch again. That is the thing Josephine did not know. That first morning at the woodpile, Josephine heard a man tell her she did not belong, and she took it, fairly enough, as a man underestimating her. She did not know she was standing in the shadow of a dead woman named Caroline. She did not know that every doubt Wade Hollis aimed at her was really a wound Wade carried about someone else. And so the two of them began the season badly, each misreading the other, the way people do. Josephine thought Wade was arrogant. Wade thought Josephine was doomed, and both of them were wrong, and it would take the whole winter, and a blizzard, and the truth about Caroline to set it right. Wade Hollis kept his promise to old Amos Carrow, which meant Wade kept coming over to the Carrow place, certain that each visit would be the one where he found Josephine finally ready to quit. And week by week, Josephine Carrow proved him wrong instead. The first thing was the wood, which we have seen. But the wood was only the beginning, because a ranch is 1,000 hard tasks, and Wade expected Josephine to fail at all of them, and Josephine kept quietly not failing. There was the fence. A long stretch of the north fence had gone down over the winter, and Wade came by one afternoon, meaning to offer to mend it for her, the way you mend a thing for someone who cannot mend it themselves. Wade found Josephine already halfway down the line, setting posts. Her hands were blistered and wrapped in rags. Her good coat was long since given up for a canvas one of Amos's, and the fence she had set was straight and tight and correct. "Uncle Amos wrote me how to set a post," Josephine said, when Wade stared. "Tamp the dirt in layers," he said, "not all at once, or it heaves in the spring." Is that not right? It was exactly right. Wade had been setting posts for 30 years and could not have said it better. Wade mumbled that it was right, and helped her finish the line, and rode home unsettled all over again. There was the garden. Josephine put in a garden that spring that was better tended than any garden Wade had seen on the Powder River, because Josephine, it turned out, had grown things in a Boston backyard her whole life and knew more about coaxing food out of dirt than most ranch wives did. There was the milk cow, which Josephine learned to milk in a week. There was the matter of the coyotes after the chickens, which Josephine solved with a borrowed rifle and a patience that surprised even her. And here is the thing that Wade Hollis began to notice, somewhere in the middle of all this being proved wrong. He began to notice that he was inventing reasons to ride over. The fence was mended. Amos's promise did not require a visit every few days. But Wade kept finding reasons, and the reasons were getting thinner, and Wade was not being fully honest with himself about why. Because Josephine Carrow was not what Wade had thought a city woman was. Josephine was not soft. Josephine was not helpless. Josephine was stubborn and capable and quick to laugh at her own mistakes, and she asked Wade good questions and listened hard to the answers, and she was slowly, visibly, falling in love with the hard country that Wade had been sure would break her. That was the part Wade could not get over. Caroline had withered here. Josephine was blooming. Same wind, same winters, same endless work. And where Caroline had shrunk, Josephine seemed to grow, as if the hardness of the place were feeding her rather than wearing her away. Josephine, for her part, had begun to revise her own first opinion of Wade Hollis. She had thought him arrogant that first morning. But a woman notices things over a season. Josephine noticed that Wade, for all his blunt talk about her not belonging, never once actually let her struggle alone with a thing that was truly beyond one person. Josephine noticed that the wood she could not have hauled appeared, hauled, that the heavy gate she had been fighting was quietly rehung, level, one morning when she was not looking, that Wade's gruffness sat on top of something a good deal softer, the way a hard rind sits on top of sweet fruit. There was an evening, late in that spring, that shifted something between them. Wade had stayed later than usual, the two of them working out a plan for Josephine's small herd, and Josephine had made supper and set two places without either of them remarking on it, the way a habit forms before you notice it has. And over the supper, Josephine asked Wade, plainly, the question she had been holding. "Mr. Hollis, why were you so sure I would fail? You did not even know me. You took one look at my coat and decided the land would break me. Why?" And Wade Hollis, who was not a man who talked easily about the deep things, looked at his plate for a long moment, and Wade very nearly told her about Caroline right then. He got as far as, "I knew a woman once who came out here from a town, and the land was hard on her." And then Wade's nerve failed him, the way it does. And he finished only with, "I didn't want to watch that happen again." Josephine heard that there was more under it. Josephine was wise enough not to reach for the more before Wade was ready to give it. So Josephine only said, "Well, I am not her, whoever she was. I hope you are starting to see that." And Wade said, "Quiet, I'm starting to." And that was as far as it went that night. But it was a good deal further than it had ever gone before. So the season turned, spring into summer into the first bite of the next autumn, and Josephine Carrow ran her ranch, and did not fail, and Wade Hollis rode over on his thinning excuses, and the thing between them grew the way the best things grow, slow and unremarked, in the ordinary daily work of two people who have started, without quite admitting it, to build something together. Neither of them had said a word about love, but the two places had begun to feel, to both of them, like one place with a fence running through the middle of it, and a fence, as Josephine had learned, is a thing you can always take down. The blizzard came in the 2nd November, a year and a month after Wade Hollis first told Josephine Carrow that a ranch was no place for a city girl. It came the way the bad ones come on the Powder River, fast and mean, dropping out of a gray sky with a wind that could take the breath out of a person. Josephine had her small herd out in the near pasture, and when Josephine saw that sky, she knew, from a year of learning this country, exactly what it meant and exactly how little time she had. The cattle would drift with the wind and pile up against the far fence and smother or freeze if they were not moved to the shelter of the draw. It was a job for more than one person. There was no more than one person. There was only Josephine, and the storm coming on. So Josephine Carrow did not sit in her warm house and wait for someone to save her stock. Josephine pulled on every warm thing she owned, and saddled her horse in the rising wind, and rode out into the beginning of the blizzard to move her cattle herself, because they were hers, and saving them was hers to do. Wade Hollis saw the same sky from his place, and Wade's first thought, before his own stock, was Josephine. Wade thought of the city woman alone, with a herd and a storm coming, and Wade's heart went into his throat in a way that told him, plainer than any thinking could, exactly how far gone he already was. Wade left his own hands to see to his own cattle, and Wade rode for the Carrow place through the thickening snow, praying he would find Josephine safe in her house. He did not find Josephine in her house. Wade found her out in the white roaring dark of the near pasture, on her horse, working the herd toward the draw, doing it right, doing it exactly the way it needed to be done, alone. Wade's fear turned into something else when he saw her. It turned into a fierce, startled pride. And then Wade Hollis rode into the storm beside Josephine Carrow, and the two of them moved that herd together, shouting to each other over the wind, until every last animal was down in the shelter of the draw, where the snow could not pile and the wind could not reach. It took them the better part of 2 hours in a storm that could have killed either of them, and when it was done, when the cattle were safe, and the two of them were near frozen through, they rode back to the Carrow house half blind in the white, and stumbled inside, and Wade got a fire roaring, while Josephine put coffee on with hands too cold to feel the pot. They sat by that fire as the blizzard screamed against the walls, both of them shaking with cold and the aftermath of hard danger. And something had changed in the way they looked at each other, the way things change when two people have faced death side by side and come out the other side. Wade Hollis looked at Josephine Carrow, wrapped in a blanket with her wet hair, and her chapped face, and her eyes still bright from the fight with the storm, and Wade knew he could not hold the truth back any longer. "I have to tell you about Caroline," Wade said. And so, at last, Wade Hollis told Josephine the whole of it. He told her about the bright girl from the town, and the courtship, and bringing Caroline home to the Powder River as his bride. He told her about the withering, the slow wearing down, the way Caroline had shrunk from the wind and the winters, and the loneliness, until there was almost nothing left of the girl he had married. He told her about the fever that finished it, and the guilt he had carried ever since, the certainty that he had brought a soft town girl to a hard country, and watched it kill her by inches. "That is why I told you a ranch was no place for a city girl," Wade said, and his voice was rough. "It was never that I thought you were less. It was that I had watched it happen once, watched this land take the life out of a woman I loved, and I could not stand to watch it again. So I looked at your coat and your soft hands, and I saw Caroline, and I tried to send you home to save you." Wade looked at Josephine across the fire. "And you went and proved me wrong about every single thing. You did not wither, Josephine. You bloomed. I have watched you all season, growing stronger where Caroline grew weaker. And tonight I watched you ride into a blizzard and save your own herd. And I have to tell you, I have never in my life been so glad to be so wrong about anything." Josephine Carrow listened to all of it. And when Wade was done, Josephine understood, at last, the shape of the man she had spent a year misjudging. She understood that his doubt had been love for a dead woman, not scorn for a living one. And Josephine felt something in her own chest give way, some last wall she had built back in Boston, in the house where she had been a burden politely borne. "Wade Hollis," Josephine said softly, "I am so sorry about Caroline, and I need you to hear this, because it matters. I did not come out here to be saved, by you or anyone. I came out here to stop being a thing that other people carried, so do not ever try to save me from this country again. But you can, if you like, share it with me. Those are very different things." The blizzard blew for 2 days. Wade Hollis could not have gone home if he had wanted to, and he did not want to. So Wade stayed, in the spare room, proper and respectful, and the two of them spent 2 snowbound days in the warm house, while the world went white outside. And in those 2 days, They talked more honestly than either of them had talked to another living soul in years. Josephine told Wade about Boston, about the engagement that ended when her family's money ran short, about the long humiliation of being a burden born. Wade understood it better than Josephine expected, because Wade, in his own way, had spent 5 years being a burden to himself, carrying a guilt about Caroline that he had never set down, never told anyone, never let anyone help him lift. And on the second evening, with the storm finally easing and the two of them sitting by the fire, Wade Hollis said the thing plainly, because Josephine was a woman who valued plain speech, and Wade had learned that much about her at least. "I owe you an apology, and I owe you the truth, and I am going to give you both, and then I am going to ask you something," Wade said. "The apology is for that first morning at the woodpile. I looked at you and I decided who you were before you had said a word, and I was wrong about all of it, top to bottom. You are the most capable person I have ever known, man or woman, city or country, and I have spent a year watching you prove it while I got slowly and completely undone." Wade took a breath, and here is the truth. Somewhere between the woodpile and the blizzard, I stopped riding over here to keep my promise to Amos, and started riding over here because a day I did not see you had come to feel like a day gone wrong. I did not want to feel that. I fought it. I had buried one woman I loved on this land, and I was afraid, down to my boots, to love another. But I have run clean out of ways to pretend I do not. Then Wade Hollis asked his question. "I am not asking you to be saved, Josephine, because you have shown me plain that you do not need saving. I am asking if you would share this country with me, 2 places with a fence between them, and I would like, more than I have wanted anything in 5 years, to take that fence down. Will you have me?" Josephine Carrow was quiet for a moment, and in that moment she thought about the woman she had been a year and a half before, stepping off a train in a ruined Boston coat, determined only to have one thing in the world that was hers, and to never again be a burden anyone had to carry. And Josephine understood that Wade Hollis was not asking her to be carried. Wade was asking to stand beside her, as an equal, on land they would both work. That was the only kind of asking Josephine could ever have said yes to, and it was, as it happened, exactly the asking Wade had made. "I will have you, Wade Hollis," Josephine said. "On one condition, we take the fence down together. I am not moving into your place to become a rancher's wife who watches from the window. My ranch stays my ranch. Your ranch stays your ranch. And we run them as one, side by side, 2 people who both know how to set a post and split a round of wood. Can you live with a wife like that?" And Wade Hollis laughed, a real laugh, the first fully free laugh Josephine had heard from him in a year. "Josephine," Wade said, "a wife like that is the only kind I would ever want. I just did not know it existed until you split that 3rd round of pine without looking up at me." And so, by the fire, with the last of the blizzard dying outside, a man who had once told a woman she did not belong asked that same woman to build a life with him, precisely because she had proved she belonged more than he did. There is a justice in that, I have always thought. The very thing Wade tried to send Josephine away for became the thing he could not live without. Wade Hollis and Josephine Carrow were married the following spring, and they took down the fence between the 2 places, and they ran the joined land together for the rest of their long lives, 2 stubborn, capable people who each knew how to do everything, which meant nothing on that ranch ever went undone. The Boston relatives never quite understood it. Josephine wrote to them, now and again, and tried to explain that she had not been rescued by a rancher, that she had built a life and a partnership and a marriage of equals on land that was truly hers. But the Boston relatives could only picture a woman being saved from her poverty by a man, because that was the only story they knew. Josephine stopped trying to explain, after a while. Some people can only read one kind of ledger. Josephine had a better one now, written in split wood and set posts and cattle moved through a blizzard, and she did not need Boston to be able to read it. Wade never forgot Caroline, and Josephine never asked him to. There was a place in Wade for the bright girl who had withered, and Josephine understood that grief does not have to be crowded out to make room for love. There was room for both, the way there had been room for both in another house, in another of these stories, if you have heard them. A good heart is not a small house. It has many rooms. And the woodpile stayed. Of course the woodpile stayed. Josephine split her own wood for the rest of her days, long after there were hired hands who could have done it, because splitting wood was the first thing she had done on that land, and the thing that had cracked Wade Hollis open, and she was fond of it for both reasons. Sometimes Wade would come out and find her at the block, splitting rounds she did not need split, and Wade would lean on the fence and watch her, the way he had watched her that first cold morning, except that now the watching was all love and no doubt. Once, years on, a young man came looking for ranch work, and he saw Josephine at the woodpile and made the mistake of offering to do it for the little lady. And Wade Hollis, passing by, said only, "I would not, son. I told her a ranch was no place for a city girl once. She has been proving me wrong ever since, and I have never enjoyed being wrong so much in my life. Let her split her wood." And Josephine, not looking up, smiled the same small, patient smile she had smiled that first morning, and set up another round, and split it clean.